My name is Philip. I am the CTO of Byte. We are the creators of the first cryptocurrency of Austria, which is called Hero Coin, with the ticker symbol PLAY. And I have the honor to give a little talk today about a topic which we faced the last few weeks. It is about authentication with Laravel Passport and Vue.js. What will I talk about? I will talk about, first of all, the backend a little bit, about Laravel Passport, what it is, why using it, how to use it, but I will not go into great detail because this is a Vue.js meetup and let's have details about Vue.js and not Laravel or PHP here. And then we are looking at the front end, at the Vue.js front end, how to get the access token from Laravel Passport, how to store it, and how to use it. First of all, what is Laravel Passport? It's an OAuth 2 implementation. OAuth 2 is the ruler of authentication currently. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and all of the services use OAuth 2. But the implementation is quite complex and difficult if you build it up from scratch. So Passport is a full OAuth 2 server implementation. And it uses the leak OAuth 2 implementation as basis and provides easy to learn and easy to implement syntax. So you can import, you can use the Laravel Passport and have a complete OAuth 2 server implementation in your product, in your project. I will not go in detail here, just a short explanation of OAuth 2. What is it about? You have the application, you have a resource owner, and first of all, you need a request to the resource owner, which gets back with an authorization grant, and then the application can ask the authorization server with the grant for a token. And if everything is correct, the application gets a token back and can access the resource on the server with this access token. That's the basic fundamental thing of OAuth 2. In detail, it's much more complex. So why and when do you use Laravel Passport? Think about you want to separate your backend and the front end, because this is what we are currently doing or what we have done the last few weeks and months. It makes sense to do this because you can reuse your backend with mobile applications for Android, iOS, and your web application, your web front end. So you do not have to maintain multiple backends. And this is the sense of separating backend from front end. And it's also currently best practice, so you should do it. But if you disconnect your backend from front end, normally you do not have sessions anymore, right? You do not have a web session where you can store your user in, because the backend is somewhere else. And therefore, you're implementing an API, and the API typically uses tokens to authenticate users. So every time when you access the API, you need to send an API token with it, an access token, so that the backend knows which user wants to request the resource, right? So if you have the need for a secure API or give others a secure way to consume your API, then you need access tokens. And then it makes sense to use the OAuth 2 implementation of Laravel Passport. So what are you doing if you want to use Laravel Passport? First of all, you need to set up a Laravel project. I will not go into that. But if you have the Laravel project, you just install Laravel Passport with Composer. Composer is the package manager of Laravel. And you just say Composer require Laravel Passport, and then this package is included into your project. as simple as that. Afterwards, Laravel Passport needs some data infrastructure, so it needs tables in your database, and you simply need to call the migrate. You need to execute PHP artisan migrate, and then all the tables you need are in your database. So easy setup for this as well. Afterwards, we need some encryption keys and seed the database with basic data, and therefore you call PHP artisan passport install. And then we have a look on the user model, because the user is the one which gets authenticated. So you need to extend your user model with a trait, which also comes from the package. And the trait is called has API tokens, and it enhances the functionality of your user model. So you can call some functions like getting the token or getting the user by the token and something like that. OAuth needs routes, because you talk to routes, okay? And to register these routes, you need to call passport routes in the boot method of your out service provider. It's a simple service provider of Laravel, which is always there. It's only the one call you copy in there, and then all the routes are set up for you, all the routes you will need. And at the end, and then you're finished with setup and installing Passport, at the end you need to say to tell your application that it should use API tokens, it should use Passport when it comes to authentication for your API. So you just go into the config file, which is called out.php, and set the driver option at the API authentication guard to Passport. That's it. That's the simple setup for Laravel Passport. There's one problem we faced right at the beginning, because we made this setup and we tried to connect the front end with the backend, and I guess some of you already know this access control allow origin error. It's the famous course problem. And what's missing here is that we did not set the correct authentication headers. And that's also simple to do in Laravel. I just wanted to show it to you because we had to research for it a few minutes, maybe an hour, to find it. But it's quite simple. As I told you, within the out service provider, you just copy the call passport routes to register your routes. And you can wrap it into a route group with the middleware course. Yeah? You're telling Laravel that before going into the routes of Passport, go through the middleware. And within the middleware, you just define headers. Yeah? So it appends headers to your request, and then you're good to go, and the course problem goes away, right? So think of that. If you have the course problem, you just need a middleware to append the headers which are needed. I want to show you, can I stop the presentation somehow there? Robert? Does not work with escape. I just want to show you.
This is escape. Try this
Yeah.
one.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, sorry. It's a problem for me because I do not have the postman call here on this laptop. So yeah, unfortunately, I can't show it to you. Doesn't matter. I can explain it. I just need to start the presentation again, please. I do not work with LibreOffice. Does anyone here? Okay, so I'm not the only one. Okay. What I wanted to show you was that I wanted to open Postman. I think most of you know it. It's just a simple application where you can make calls to an API, get, post, anything like that. And what I wanted to show you is that we can post now, if we have set up Laravel Passport, we can post to the route OAuth token. It's automatically integrated because you called already the passport routes command in the out service provider. And if you have set up the grant type correctly, then you will get back, and the secret correctly, then you will get back an access token. And this is what I wanted to show you, that you can access then the resource user with the access token. But we will see it in the presentation afterwards with Vue. So let's go on with Vue.js. So the backend is finished now. We have passport set up. We have the course middleware set up. So it's good to go now. What we want to do in the front end. We want to use the OAuth passport grant client. It's one grant client of the OAuth implementation, and it's the one where you send a username and a password and get back an access token. This is what we want. There are also other grant clients for machine-to-machine communication, for example, but this is the interesting one for normal logins. We use Axios. How many of you know Axios? Yeah, so most of you, it's a simple package for creating calls to an API, for example, or a web service. And I think it's a great one, so I can recommend to using that. And if we post to OAuth token, which I wanted to show you, we need to send some data with it. We need to send the grant type, which is the passport grant type. We need to send the client ID. What is the client ID? As I told you before, you have database tables. And if you call the command passport install, which we did, then passport seeds these tables. And it seeds the clients. So after this command, you have two clients in your database. And one of these clients is the password grant client. And normally it has the ID 2. So we're sending grant type password and client ID 2. And then this client has a client secret in the database. And you have just to copy it and paste it here in the front end. And then you are allowed to send data to Passport, and Passport checks your username and the password you send with it. So these are two data fields you additionally need. If this is correct, Passport checks if this is correct in your database. If it's correct, then you will get back the access token. And the access token is needed for further requests. How does it look in code? Just simplified. If you have a look there, we have the login function. You see the mouse here? No. You have the login function with a user and some passport, which is a simple string, an input. And the user is just a user object because we are using TypeScript to wrap the data. And then we make the call, the post call, to our API endpoint. This is simply a variable in our environment. It's localhost something, yeah, plus the OAuth/token. So what we are doing now, we're trying to get the token. And in this part here, you can see that we need to send the data which I talked before. We need the grant type, client ID, client secret, which is stored in environment files. And then we are sending the user email and the password, which was the input of the user. As simple as that. And now the question is, what are we doing with this access token? Because now we are getting the access token, but we need the access token for further requests also. So what are we doing? And I think it's best practice currently is to store this access token into the local browser storage. And this is what I wanted to show you. It's quite simple with Vue.js because you can just call the button. You can see the set method. And you can just call local storage set item. Then you give the key and then the token. And we will see later in a short video that the token is then stored in the local storage and you can access it whenever you want. And it's also persistent at the browser. So a very cool thing. Additionally, of course, you can get it. It's the get function above, just with local storage get item and the same key again. Simple as that. Yeah, here you can see the complete function. So we're doing the login. We try to get an access token. And in the promise after that, we save the access token to the local storage. In addition, here in this example, we also save if the user logged in with email and password or with a social login like Facebook, something like that. I will also show that. You would also get additional data like the expiry date, like the token type, which is normally a bearer token, and the refresh token. If you ask yourself what is the refresh token now, we do not use it because if the access token is expired, then we force the user to log in again. It's simply a security feature for us. But in the OAuth 2 implementation, you have the possibility, if the token expires, you can generate a new token with the refresh token. It's just a token which lasts a little bit longer than the normal access token. And if your access token expires, you can get a new access token with the refresh token, and you additionally also get a new refresh token. So in fact, you can create a loop where you can stay logged in, but we do not want this, so just for security reasons. Good. This is the use of the stored access token. So we have an interceptor here. It's quite cool in Axios. You can intercept your Axios calls and add something to the calls before they are set to the internet. And what we are doing here, every time when an access token is called, Axios call is made, then we append the access token which we have in the local storage to this call. So it's just a single point where you tell your application, always when you call the API, just add the access token. Okay? This is a short video. Please have a look. We try to log in now with email and password. It's a simple mock-up. And you will see then in the local storage afterwards, we have the access token in the local storage there. Okay? It's called access token. The key is access token, and you can see the token in there. Okay? We also store the login type, as I said, the user logged in with password, and we store the token type, it is bearer. Why do we do this? Because there are some other token types, but you need to add this to your API call. The thing is, Passport wants you to add the access token to the call. And the data property is named access token, but it expects you to write bearer, then a white space, and then the token. Okay? So for everyone of you who never used bearer tokens, just keep that in mind because it's a point of failure. And I came across this because first I tried it without bearer and then I was wondering why it was not working. But as simple as that, add bearer, white space, and then it's working. Okay. So we have covered normal login. If you know how to do it, you can set up this within maybe an hour. So login is quite simple. But lately we faced a little bit harder problem. We wanted to implement a social login. We wanted to implement a Facebook login. And there are packages. There is, for example, this package Laravel Socialite, which is really great and makes the Facebook login quite simple. But they implemented it for the use of applications where you do not separate the backend from the front end and where you have sessions. This is the core thing here. So out of the box, Socialite works great, but only if you have sessions. If you have an API, you have to do additional work, and I just want to briefly mention what we did, but also do not go into details. Just to clarify, Socialite is also a package which you can install over Composer, and it helps you to authenticate with other OAuth providers, supports Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Google, GitHub, and so on. So great. But in the end, how do we get an access token from Socialite? This was the question for us. And for normal login with Socialite, if you have no API, you just place the credentials in the config services. For example, here at GitHub. We are again in the backend, by the way. And then you have to create some routing, only 2 routes. You have to create the route for redirect the user to Facebook, for example, and then the route which handles the callback from Facebook again. In the controller for the routes, you see the 2 functions, redirect to provider and handle provider callback. It's as simple as that. Socialite does everything for you. It creates for you the route to the provider, to Facebook, for example, in the first method, and it gets for you the user, so it parses automatically the callback from Facebook into a user object. Really great. So if you look at the small picture here, you have the application, triggers the login, gets the redirect to Facebook. Then you have the authentication process there. The user has to accept the application. And if it is successful, you get a Facebook code back to your application. Socialite passes this code, gets the user object, and you can, for example, register or log in this user into your application. That's the simple thing. But if you have an API, it's a little bit more complex. You still can use Socialite and it makes sense, but you have to do a little bit of additional work because the front end triggers the login. So the user clicks on the Facebook button. But then you have to go back to your backend to create this redirect URL. So you go to the API, to this Socialite route, get back the target URL, the redirect URL, and the front end makes a redirect to Facebook. After that, you have the authentication process again, but the code goes back to the front end because the front end called Facebook. Yeah, not the API called Facebook, front end called Facebook, because we want the user to be redirected within the front end. Yeah, and then the front end gets back the code, the Facebook code, and you have to send again the Facebook code to the API, and the API now can parse the code, can create the user or create an access token for the user, and sends back the access token to the front end, and the front end stores it again in the local storage. Okay? I hope you see the difference here because of using of an API. It's simple when you know how to do it, but we needed to think about it, and there's not a lot of source on the internet about this. Just again, a short video how it's looking like currently at our login page there. You have the Facebook button, then this communication with the API, then you come back or you come to Facebook, authenticate yourself, come back to the front end makes the call back to the API creates the access token, sends it back to the front end, and you saw it in the video at the top. We have again this access token in the local storage, so we are authenticated again. Good. This was a little presentation about authentication. I think there are some details which you have to look up. But if you know the basics, about OAuth, Passport, and Axios, it's quite simple to set it up in Vue.js. And by the way, in my opinion, Vue.js is one of the greatest JavaScript frameworks I've ever used. So I'm really happy to talk here about this. And all my employees are also really happy, even those which programmed React and Angular before. So just a side note. And another addition to the viewers at the broadcast, we are currently hiring. So if you're interested, we have a great team, great place to work. Please contact me. I think the contact information are written down there somewhere. So please contact me. Good. That's it from me. So thank you. And if you have any questions, please ask them afterwards.